Well, okay. If you were reading that and following along, you might be wondering, what in the world? What are we going to do with this? We got Jonah and a whale reference. We got like unclean, like a gang of unclean spirits calling their buddies and like occupying somebody. And it's like, what is this? Okay. Here, let me tell you up front. This is a passage that it's in the middle of the Gospel of Matthew, what we've been walking through. The big thing that's going on here is seeing Jesus. Okay, seeing Jesus. Simple idea, more complicated than you think. Seeing him rightly. Okay, we've been walking through the Gospel of Matthew for over a year now. We've come to chapter 12, and hopefully one of the things you've been noticing is that, the picture of Jesus that we can sort of easily have if we're just kind of looking to pop culture or imagining what we think in our head is like, almost like the Jesus with the perfectly shampooed hair, and he's like petting lambs and walking among the hills, and it's kind of just like, this guy's important for some reason, but he's just like, what is he really doing? And we know he has this teaching, but it's very disconnected and ambiguous. And if you've been reading the Gospel of Matthew, haven't you seen, like, actually the setting of the story of Jesus it's a war zone. It's a war zone. From his birth, they're trying to kill him. Now they're still trying to kill him. Like he's dodging bullets and casting out demons, and there is darkness kind of surrounding him now. Even the little image that Dion designed for this portion of Matthew 12 is, you see how it's getting darker. This whole section that we're in is the opposition that's setting in, because Jesus, okay, here's who he is. He is, and he came as a conquering king into enemy-occupied territory to take back the world that is rightfully his. And last week, if you were here, Alfonso preached from the previous part of Matthew 12, and he titled the message, Jesus came to set the captives free, right? He came on a rescue mission. And really today's text is continuing in that. You could really think of it as part 2 of that message. And we're going to go even deeper into what it means to be a captive. Okay, what does it mean to be one of these people that Jesus came to set free? Because let me tell you, it's a deeper captivity than even physical shackles. Okay, it's a deeper captivity than any external circumstance that you could think of that holds you back or bogs you down. He came to set the captives free, but what does it really mean to be captive? That's this sermon. Now, before we jump into the passage, let me acknowledge there's a weird noise. Have you guys heard this noise? It's like, I think it's a fan, okay? It's one of those fans. So just so you're not distracted, I'm pretty sure it's that fan. I don't know why it's making that noise, but let's just have a moment to acknowledge it. There it is, okay? We good? Okay. Let's go to verse 38. What does it mean, this captivity? Okay, we're gonna first see this. It's a deeper captivity than you would think. Read verse 38 with me. It says, then, okay, so bridging from last week, he's been talking to the Pharisees, right? Then some of the scribes and Pharisees said to him, Teacher, we want to see a sign from you. Okay, we want to see a sign. I titled this sermon, Show Us a Sign. All right, when it comes to belief in Jesus, many people will say something like this. Maybe you've thought or said something like this in your life. Like, Jesus, I would believe in you if I could just see you. If I could have been alive during the time of Jesus. And if I could just see him, or maybe not that, but I just see him in my life now. If I could just see him working. Maybe you even prayed, like, God, show me a sign that you're real. And for some Christians, that's actually a big part of their story. They would tell their story as a way of God showing up in their life in a way that was just undeniable and powerful. And they began to follow him because they could not ignore his reality. And that is great. I'm sure there's testimonies in this room that's your story. And here's the thing. We do need God to reveal himself to us if we're to know anything about him. We can't kind of imagine and understand our way towards what he's like. He is beyond us. He is above us. He has to sort of stoop down to explain it to us in terms we can understand, okay? We do need God to reveal himself to us, and that's why we preach the Bible. That's why we teach the scriptures, because that's what they are. It's God's revelation. But here's the thing that's wild about this passage, and maybe you already picked up on it by reading verse 38, is this: haven't the Pharisees already witnessed many signs from Jesus? Haven't they already seen these things? They've been along for the ride the whole time. He's been healing people and driving demons out of people and raising the dead, and they've been sitting in on his teaching that has been astonishing the crowds. And not only that, he's been showing them from their scriptures that they were teachers of. He's been showing them time and time again that he is the promised Messiah King, that he's the fulfillment of all the promises and the prophecies of the Old Testament. He's been saying, he's not been hiding. He's been out in the open time and time again, over and over, that he is the one they've been waiting for, and he's standing right in front of them. But now we see that they've been arguing with him, and now in the midst of that they say, hey, we need another sign. Like, would you just show us a sign that you're real, that you are who you say you are? This is the tension of the text. This is what we got to go on. Like, what's going on with this? And here it is. The Pharisees are revealing that they have hearts that are captivated by the sin of unbelief. Okay? The sin of unbelief. Believing or not believing in Jesus is not a neutral thing of just a choice. It is a sinful captivity of the heart to not believe in Jesus. Okay, the sin of unbelief, it can look like a PhD level atheist hosting lectures and debates, just arguing about the ridiculousness of religion. It can definitely look like that. But it can also look like people that we live with and hang out with and work with every day who are nice people, decent people that are just trying to make their way through life, but without God, without Christ. And it can even look like people who are making a living off of leading people religiously, teaching people about God. That's what's wild about this passage. That's the Pharisees. Let that sink in. And here's the thing. They're not denying that Jesus is really physically there in front of them. Like they're acknowledging him as a real person and even a teacher. But they do not believe his claims to be divine. Okay, so this is the position of many false religions today. You know this is what Islam believes about Jesus. They totally believe that he was real. They even revere and honor him as a great prophet. He's in the Quran, but they do not believe that he is God. That this is the same with modern Judaism, the descendants of the Pharisees. This is the same with Mormonism. This is the same with Jehovah's Witnesses. This is the same with Buddhism. This was the position of Gandhi. Great guy, Gandhi. And he said, Jesus is the greatest moral teacher I've ever seen or read or encountered. Did not believe him to be God, though. This is Ben Franklin. This is Thomas Jefferson. This is the oldest trick in the political book. And any political leader will quickly realize, okay, Jesus would be a very useful ally to my cause because he has a lot of followers. So any political leader that makes some sort of an allegiance to Jesus as useful, even his teachings, which I'm all about Jesus' teachings, but doesn't worship him as God, especially as their God, is revealing, like, oh yeah, they think Jesus is real, they think Jesus is great, they think Jesus is even valuable, useful, but he's not who he says he is ultimately. It's not worth worshiping and devoting my life to. And guys, this is the view of most of your next door neighbors, family, friends, coworkers. This might be the view of someone who is here, maybe many of you who are here, wrestling and asking questions. Honestly, if you were to stop most people off the street right now, they'll actually probably, this is what I've been finding, they'll probably tell you they believe in God. They believe in the existence of some kind of a higher power, and they will likely also tell you they believe Jesus existed as a historical figure. They believe in God, they believe in Jesus, but that's not the most important question. The most important question is, do you believe that Jesus is God, who has always existed? You guys tracking with me? This is what the conflict between Jesus and the Pharisees is all about. And this is the dividing line between humanity today. It is not between religious people and irreligious people. The dividing line in humanity is not between atheists and theists. It's between people who believe and love and worship Jesus as God and people who don't. That's the line. Now, there is space to honestly ask questions and wrestle with these things that I'm even saying right now, things that you might not yet understand or have even heard. Like there's tons of space for that. If you really have questions about Jesus, like I could point you, and so could people in the church, point you to so much evidence for the existence of God, resources about the reliability of the Christian faith. Like you could be reading for years with how many books have been written, podcasts have been recorded. Really helpful conversations could happen in here. But hear me, the problem isn't that there isn't enough evidence for Jesus. Okay, these encounters with the Pharisees, they show us that, here's what's wild. These encounters with the Pharisees, they show us that some people won't believe in Jesus even if they meet him face to face and get to ask him and engage with him in questions directly and get to see him do miraculous things. That's what's wild about this. That's what's scary about this. They are the people that they didn't have to get in a time machine and go travel back to biblical times. They were with him. They saw him. They talked to him. And I hear this. These encounters with the Pharisees, they show us that sometimes our intellectual objections to Jesus are really a cover for something deeper. Okay, some hearts are so captive to sin that they just don't want to see what they're seeing. They don't want to see. All of the evidence in the world isn't enough for their unbelief. Jesus points this out. As I was studying the text this week, I'm trying to figure out, I was like, what is the problem? He's right in front of them. Jesus who knows the heart, who sees the heart, he knows what the problem is, and he answers it in verse 39. Look at what he points out, verse 39. So he answered them. They asked him for a sign. He answered them. An evil and adulterous generation demands a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. All right. So he responds to their question by saying, you don't need more information or more evidence, because the reason you don't believe in me is because you don't want to. You don't want to. What does he say about their hearts? He says your hearts are evil. They are fundamentally oriented away from good and God. Your hearts are evil. And he says they're adulterous. He says their hearts are adulterous. Now, listen, people don't commit adultery because they lacked information. And they all of a sudden, they got confused and they didn't realize who their spouse was. People commit adultery because they desired, even for a moment, someone else. It's about desire. Jesus says this is why the Pharisees don't believe. They're not lacking in information. They're not even lacking in evidence. They're not lacking in access. They don't want him to be who he says he is. Now, here's where it bridges into our day a little bit. Is I can't tell you how many people I've talked to over the years, across the spectrum, but specifically people who do not believe in and love and follow Jesus, and great conversations, right? I love having those conversations. But at some point in that mix, I'll ask why. And everyone always has some reason why if you dig and if you ask, and they'll always have a few objections, kind of like these stumbling blocks they'll put in front of, like, well, here's why I don't believe, and they'll hold them up as reasons why they don't believe. And honestly, at that moment in the conversation, it's like, okay, yeah, I could understand that. Like, let's talk about that. But I'll always ask a follow-up question, and I'll ask them, now, with that objection, this isn't true for everybody, but with that objection, those questions, have you really like looked into that and read the Bible, and just kind of sought God to see what the answer for that might be? Because actually, there's a lot of things that he says about your question. Or have you ever leaned into a local church in your area or a Christian you know and just said, hey, I'm wrestling with this, like help me understand this? Have you ever actually put in the effort to try to see if there's answers to this objection you're saying for why I don't follow Jesus? I'm telling you guys, this is not true for everybody, but so often the answer is no. They have objections, but they haven't actually seen if there's answers. Now again, it is so great to have questions. Like, it's even great to have doubts that you're wrestling with, in the sense of, like, I would love if you had those and you wanted to talk about those. So much of the ministry of Jesus, even right now, is him engaging with people. He's educating people. He's interacting with them. He's so patient. He has answers. Even his very own disciples, they have doubts all the way to the end, and he is so patient with them. So many of you could share of how, even right now as a follower of Jesus, there's things you don't understand and things that you doubt that God is patient with you on as you seek him. And I'm so thrilled as a pastor when somebody just humbly is like, hey, I don't believe this. Even this sounds ridiculous, but is there an answer for it? Can we talk it out? If that's you, please. Would love to. Let's do it. But when someone has doubts and objections about Christianity that they're not putting in the effort to investigate, they're revealing that the questions they have are not actually stumbling blocks. They are defense mechanisms. Think about it like this. If I told you there was $100 million buried, maybe let's say underneath that noisy fan, okay? Underneath that fan, somewhere up in the wood beams. If I said there is $100 million up in those wood planks, and if whoever gets up there can get it. Now, you might think, well, how am I going to get up there? Because it's all the way up there. But I guarantee you, many of you would try. You'd be climbing up the walls. You'd be building a platform from the back over there. Some of you might be thinking, like, this guy's crazy. Like, why? Like, why would he be saying this? But you would at least, for that kind of a claim, $100 million, you'd be like, all right, it's worth at least a few hours of my time to try to figure out if I can get up there and remove that plank. If I told you that Jesus of Nazareth is the God who created all things, including you, that his power right now is keeping you alive, that he has a plan for your life and for this world, that you're separated from him because of your sin, but you can be reconciled to him because of his grace, and that you can walk through life with the God of the universe on your side, leading you all the way to certain glory. No more pain, no more sin, no more evil, perfect joy forever. If I told you that was on the table, and you shrug it off and say, okay, I don't know about that. What you're actually saying, you're not saying, well, I don't understand that, or that doesn't seem like it could be true. You're saying, I actually don't want to know about that. This is the evil and adulterous heart. Okay, it doesn't see the glory of God in Jesus because it doesn't want to. Okay, in fact, like the Pharisees, sometimes it sees the opposite. Okay, an evil heart doesn't see God as a treasure. It sees him as a robber, someone who takes from us. He's out to get our joy and our happiness. That's who God is. He just has all these rules. Doesn't think he's great. It thinks he's a threat. And so like the Pharisees, this kind of heart, it comes up with excuses and defenses, sometimes disguised as questions, but covering the fact that honestly you're repulsed by him. It says, show us a sign. So Jesus says, I'll show you a sign. Just one more though. I'll show you a sign. Verse 40. For as Jonah was in the belly of the huge fish 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. The men of Nineveh will stand up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, because they repented at Jonah's preaching. And look, something greater than Jonah is here. The Queen of the South is another Old Testament reference. You can go read about her. She was alive during the days of Solomon. The Queen of the South, she's outside of Israel, the south of Israel. She'll rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, because she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And look, something greater than Solomon is here. These are the words of Jesus. This is Jesus' response to their request for a sign. Now remember, he is talking to men who were experts in the Bible. They had taught Bible studies and messages about the great prophet Jonah and about great King Solomon. They were very educated in the scriptures. And this is a confrontation, but would you also just notice that Jesus is just, again, patiently, lovingly meeting them where they're at. These are the Bible guys, so he says, okay, let's go to the Bible. Let me show you. Something greater than Jonah is here. He says, I'm greater than him. I'm greater than Solomon, but you don't see it. And they miss his loving appeal. And that's why also in this there's a rebuke. Did you see the rebuke from Jesus? He references Nineveh and the Queen of the South. Nineveh was a notoriously evil Gentile city. Gentile meaning non-Jew, so outside of Israel. These were people that did not have access in education to the Bible like these Pharisees. Okay, they did not have knowledge of God, but when they heard God's message, really a message of judgment from the prophet Jonah, they respond in repentance and they receive God's mercy. It's a wild story that you can read about in the book of Jonah. And Jesus references this and says, Nineveh repented. And here you are, Pharisees, descendants of Jonah, rejecting the one that Jonah foreshadowed. The Queen of the South, also a Gentile. She's very powerful. And he's like, she came from the ends of the earth to hear God's wisdom through Solomon. Jesus travels a little farther than that, right? He comes from heaven to earth. He comes. They don't go to him. He comes down. He goes into their neighborhood. He's walking around their streets. He offers them his divine wisdom, and they argue with him about it and say he has a demon. These are the leaders of the nation of Israel, God's chosen people. The rebuke is that these should be the prophets proclaiming the mercy of God to a dark world. These should be the ones bringing God's wisdom to a lost world, but instead they stand in front of Jesus as fools and as men with hearts that are self-righteous, darkened by sinful desires. So can we just agree, this is bad? This is bad. I think sometimes, especially if you've heard about the Pharisees for years, you just kind of know that they're like the bad guys, but this is bad. These are the religious leaders of the day. These are it's a different time, but this is the church leaders. This is the pastors. These are the guys. These are the ones that are leading the people spiritually. The question you got to ask is, man, how did it get this way? How is it that the descendants of Jonah, the prophet, the descendants of Solomon, the king, are now missing the one who came offering greater mercy and wisdom? Jesus ends with an illustration that shows how an unbelieving heart, it can be so captive by sin. Look at verse 43. It says, when an unclean spirit comes out of a person, it roams through waterless places looking for rest, but doesn't find any. Then it says, I'll go back to my house that I came from. Returning, it finds the house vacant, swept, and put in order. Then it goes and brings with it 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and settle down there. As a result, that person's last condition is worse than the first. Okay, and now after he's explained this, here's why I said it. Okay, he says that's how it will also be with this evil generation. All right, I know, strange passage for modern people to read. He's talking about basically a gang of demons taking up residence in a person's heart. Now, I'm not saying my roommates in college were a gang of demons, but you guys have heard various illustrations about the house I lived in college, I think, at this point. And one more that kind of illustrates this is our house was just so jacked up, man. If you walked in there, you would have thought, like, these men have ceased to be able to take care of themselves. You know, I actually don't even know if I could share as an illustration in church what the things that were on the ground and what this house looked like, and it was so dirty, disheveled, right? And I remember there were different times where we did clean it up, you know, and I remember that we got the house clean one time, and it was all looking nice. And then one of my roommates, he was from Pittsburgh, and he had all these friends from high school that didn't go to college, and he was kind of like the hometown hero that like went to college. And I just remember, man, this is where it connects to the passage. He had his like 7 or 8 friends from Pittsburgh come with us, and they show up in our house. It's like, actually, this is a pretty nice place. You know, these guys, they were not in school. They were 19 years old and had nothing to do. They stayed with us for weeks. They're just like, I'm like in my room wandering around. They're like sleeping in chairs. They're in the kitchen. It's like these guys took up residence in my house because it was a nice place to live, and they left it worse than before. Okay, the illustration there is that those guys found this house a nice place to be. Now listen to what Jesus is saying. You can plainly see from the scriptures that Satan and demons are real. Okay, we need to say that. If you've been reading Matthew, you can't argue that out of existence. They are dark spiritual beings who influence people toward evil. That's what they are. You most commonly will hear of Satan and his demons doing a few things: tempting people towards sin, deceiving them with lies, somehow, and it's mysterious. We don't totally understand how this works, but somehow blinding people so that they will not worship God. We've also seen in the Gospels examples of them tormenting people physically. And then in a way that we really don't understand, somehow occupying space in their hearts. And now, we've seen some pretty wild stuff up until this point, but before your mind now jumps to images from Hollywood and like exorcisms and just crazy, scary stuff, I want you to remember, who is Jesus talking to right now? Who is he looking in the eye as he shares this illustration, this example? Well-respected, probably clean and well-bathed, manicured beards, nice clothes, put together, competent religious leaders who look great on the outside. The Pharisees did not look deranged. They were not foaming at the mouth. They were not shouting things. They were not obviously evil. But Jesus sees right through it to the darkness that dwells in their hearts. And he's telling the Pharisees, like he says, did you notice the talk about the house? He says, you swept and cleaned up the house. It's likely a reference to the Pharisees and how they were really good at strictly adhering to the law and being very moral. They were devoutly religious. There was this sense, and you know what this is. There was this sense where they looked put together and cleaned up on the outside. They looked like they had a clean house. They were very focused on doing and enforcing the law, but all it did was make it a better place for evil to dwell. That's a wild thing that Jesus is pointing out here. And so don't miss this. Jesus is saying that being a religious and moral person like the Pharisees is one of the best ways to make room in your heart for evil. Now, if that breaks some categories or even sounds harsh, I would ask you just look at these guys. They are right now plotting to kill Jesus. Chapter 12 is all about, they decide, like, okay, we just got to kill him. And why are they doing it? Because they thought he was immoral. They thought he was blaspheming. This is where it just gets totally flipped upside down crazy. The Pharisees, they were so blinded and contorted and being used as a device for evil that they thought they were the good guys. They thought they were the defenders of the good in the faith, even in Israel. They saw Jesus as a threat. And now, crazy, I know, this is how evil can work. Many men and women got swept up into the vision of the Nazi Party in Germany, thinking this whole thing about the final solution. They believed that they were the good guys on the right side of history, doing what was best for Germany and the world. They believed that. You can be that deceived. This is one of the most twisted and deceptive ways that the devil works. You can see it as his strategy all the way since the Garden of Eden. Do you remember when he convinced Adam and Eve? What was the lie? What did the devil tempt and deceive Adam and Eve about? It was that God was the evil one. God, did he really say you couldn't eat from that tree? God, he's holding out on you. Why? He can't. How could he be good if he's not letting you take that fruit? He's the bad guy. You need the knowledge of good and evil. You need to take matters into your own hands. Take the fruit so you can have it. So it's no wonder that last week in Alfonso's text, Jesus called these guys a brood of vipers. A brood of vipers, literally like baby snakes, spawn of Satan, children of the devil. Their hearts are so captive to unbelief. Hear this, their hearts are so captive to unbelief, they believe they need to kill God in the flesh. They say, show us a sign. Jesus, the irony of the whole thing is Jesus stands in front of them as a warning sign to turn around before it's too late. All right, that's the passage. It's a dark passage. This is a dark section of Matthew. It's haunting, and it should lead us to ask, like, is there any hope for an unbelieving heart like this? Like, how can people see what they don't want to see? How can it happen? Listen, the only way it can happen, and this is a core truth of the Bible, cover to cover. The only way a blind eye can see, the only way a dead heart can come alive, listen, church, is if God makes it so. If God gives the sight, if God opens their eyes, if God shows them a sign. Jesus called it the sign of Jonah. You and I now know it as the cross, the gospel, the cross and resurrection of Jesus. Look at verse 40. He says, for as Jonah was in the belly of the huge fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. Jesus is saying, you know that crazy miracle in the Old Testament where Jonah got thrown into the sea because of the sin of the sailors, and he said, hey, take me instead of them, because I know this is really about my disobedience. Jonah gets thrown into the sea, swallowed up by this fish. Somehow, miraculously, he doesn't die, and then what happens 3 days later? He gets spat up back out onto the beach. That moment with Jonah, miraculous. Wow, that's not a normal thing that happens. That's something that God did, and here's why he did it. To point to a greater miracle, something more wild than a whale swallowing up a man, a greater miracle that he was going to do, where he himself was going to come to earth. He was going to go into the heart of the earth for 3 days, dead, and then rise from the grave. Rise from the grave. Listen, there are many, even scientific arguments for the existence of God, especially in our day. There's so much that science is discovering that is proving the Bible. There are tons of historical evidences for the reliability of the scriptures, even the resurrection of Jesus. There is a ton of that stuff, but none of those signs have the power to conquer unbelief like that bloody cross. None of them. When you read the books, you see the argument, the light bulbs go off, but sometimes the heart doesn't melt. But that cross, that bloody cross and that victorious resurrection, when you look at it, when you see it, when you see the sign of Jonah, Jesus is saying right here, this is what proves my divinity. This is what proves my divinity. The sign of Jonah. I'm going into the ground. I'm coming up out of the grave. Listen, many of you in here could testify in your story that something just happens to people when they see the cross of Christ. Something happens to you, something supernatural, something miraculous, something from God. Your sin gets exposed. You don't see the cross rightly until you feel convicted of your sin. You see, oh, he was hanging there for me. It was bloody and shameful because that's what my sin deserved. This is how bad I am. There it is on the cross. But then you see God's love displayed. You see what he was willing to go through for you. His dying, sacrificial love. More than words, confirming his words for you. You see his love. And then those things come together, okay? Your sin, his love for you while you were a sinner, the freedom that he won for you. And you see, this it's hard to explain, but the glory of Jesus as more compelling than whatever it was that you loved. Whatever it was that you trusted in. Whatever it was that you thought was the purpose of your life, you see in that cross the sign of Jonah. That this is it. This is him. And when you look at the cross, you realize why morality and being religious can't save you. Jesus, he's telling these Pharisees that trusting in your morality and trying to clean up your life, it's actually how you make more room for evil in your heart. He's like, it's like you're vacuuming and cleaning and doing all this, but then in the text it says it's vacant, right? It's vacant. And out of your self-effort and your self-will, you've said, hey, I got this, and I don't need him. That's what self-will and trying to save yourself through morality will do. It's what so many people do. It's what so many people think their only option is. To endlessly strive, to try to clean themselves up, to try to atone for their own guilt, their own failures. It's an endlessly looking inward where you only find darkness. Always sweeping and cleaning and ordering your life. Maybe performing it for other people to try to see if they'll tell you that you're okay. Or to perform a significance to cover your shame. Jesus talks to these Pharisees, but now at the end here, he's really talking to us. He says, hey, there is no salvation to be found in there, in you, in your morality, in your religion. It's only in me. So I want to start preparing you to sing in just a moment. We're going to sing a song called Raised to Life. Okay, it's a song about the sign of Jonah. Jesus went into the ground, came up out of the grave. And there's a phrase in there that says, sin was strong, Jesus is stronger. Sin was strong, Jesus is stronger. If you're here today and you don't yet believe that Jesus is God, you haven't trusted him as your Savior, I want you to just think about that statement. Sin was strong, Jesus is stronger. Would you think about your sin? Maybe you think of it as the problems in your life. Maybe you don't have language for it, but you just know there's something not right in there. You see that it's not right out there. Would you think about it? Would you admit that it's strong? Would you admit that it's too strong for you? Would you admit that no matter how hard you've tried to cover it up, clean it up, sweep it up, it hasn't worked? Would you admit that sin is strong? And I want to invite you as we sing, would you look to this man, Jesus? And would you dare to believe that he's stronger? Would you dare to believe, would you open up your mind to the possibility that there is a God who loves you, who came from heaven to earth, who was willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice for you, as Alfonso talked about last week, who bound up the strong man, the devil, to set you free? Would you consider that maybe Jesus is stronger than your sin, and then maybe that means you should turn to him and trust him and let him in? Let's pray together.